Holy shit, they fucked. Two characters actually fucked. They actually went and did it. Oh god, this is amazing. All the times I've waited for characters in these things to actually just do it, and they did it. Oh yes, this pleases me. Oh yeah, so that's kind of a weird way to open this video, but I've kind of been wanting to do this opening since I saw this episode late last night, and I've thought about doing it all day at work, so I had to do it. So this week in Darling in the Franxx, some big things happened. And unfortunately, some of them didn't land the way I wanted them to. And if you couldn't tell by the title of the video, we're going to talk about some problems the show has. Namely, one big one. And before I go further, I want to make something very clear. This is my favorite anime of the year thus far. I love most of everything about it. And I don't fully know what the solution to what I'm about to bring up is, because this is one of those series where it's a chemical concoction. It feels like this weird, random mixture that just kind of happened. And I think that's a big part of its appeal, is how sort of out there it can get with just everything. So I don't know how you really fix these things, but I think it's fair that I address them. So yeah, what is said problem? The problem is that this show really likes to bring up some big plot points and introduce some big elements and ideas, and then do nothing with them for many episodes, as we sit there mainly watching scenes of quirky dialogue and cute comedy relief, and then those plot points were just expected to, out of nowhere, remember them again. We've all noticed it in this show. The Ichigo's feelings, how Goro feels about them, what's going on with that relationship, what the actual world that we exist in, how the Franxx work, what 02 is. This show really brings up a lot of stuff, but doesn't really seem to know where to go with it. And so what ends up happening is it goes back to relying on just sort of the comedy relief and the fan service episode, which created a lot of problems. But the thing is, I do like those things, so I don't really know how you replace them, but they are problems. And it really came to fruition this week with the book. The book, the freaking book about pregnancy. I love how it looks like the most generic pregnancy book in the world, but it somehow has become one of the biggest MacGuffins in anime history. Like, everything is going down because of a goddamn dime store pregnancy novel. Like, dang. The problem with this whole thing is that when the book showed up, I thought that was a fascinating concept, because that was the beach filler episode. That was the episode where we really got a sense how ignorant these kids are about certain aspects of relationships, rather it is kissing, what it means to be in love. All of these things were brought up in that episode, and it comes to that conclusion of, here is where that all is supposed to lead to. And this is a big problem in this world, because these kids are sort of being controlled through their relationships, through their sort of puberty and development and stuff like that. So you don't want them knowing that. And I thought that was really interesting, and then it kind of gets sidelined and barely brought up again. Like, the thing is, and the problem here is, though we see the after effects of Blondie, I know they have names, and I do like all these characters, but it's a lot of people to remember. When Blondie gets the book, we see how it affects her. We see in the episode where they wanted to separate, how she was like, no, the boys and girls have to be together. We knew what that was about. We saw her treating a doll like it was a baby and kind of being fascinated by it. She's had a couple conversations with Rude Guy about, you know, what's in that book. And those are interesting, but they're side notes. They don't really impact where the story is going, or at least not in a major way. And then all of a sudden, in the show's, like, second half, final fourth, whatever you want to call it, it's just all of a sudden the biggest thing ever. I would have loved to have seen the scene where she reads that book and realizes what people can do. like that power you have to create life. I know to most of us, the concept of women getting pregnant and having children is not alien, it is completely normal, it is part of everyday life. But these kids don't have that. They didn't know that. It sounds like they thought they were willed into existence by Papa, which is a fascinating concept, but then they didn't explore it. They just kind of sidelined it, and now all of a sudden I'm just expected to feel it's the biggest thing ever, and that's not very fun. I would have loved to have seen the gears work in this girl's brain as she realized everything. I thought it was interesting how when she would talk to Rude Guy about it, he kind of had this reaction of, so what? I thought that would have been interesting to really go into. I'm sure many of you have heard of the alien movie Prometheus, you know, that really bad one. There's a really interesting scene in that where the human characters realize that humans came from engineers or the xenomorphs or whatever, and the religious person in the crew doesn't have her faith shaken because she just feels it's one more step in the puzzle of what humans are. And for the atheist guy, it doesn't really mean anything because he never really thought we were made in God's image anyways. This is a fascinating scene because it's just interesting to see how people interpret things and make it work to their thought process. The movie then does nothing with this, and it's very boring and drab, but whatever. How this sort of relates here is I want to see those reactions. I want to see how people think. So when she has that explosion scene, it really hits. And it sucks because it is a really well done scene. I love how it's shown at an angle. Like, the way she's talking is so alien and so out there. And even for the viewer, it's kind of crazy to hear because she's 15 and a 15-year-old talking about wanting to have a child and leaving an impact on the world is not something you really hear a lot. But it was interesting because, well, up until now, they've never really thought about having a future. They've never really thought about what tomorrow will actually bring. They've never really thought about growing up. Everything has always been what Papa tells us. And, well, I think you could have really done a lot more with showing how that mindset gets broken down. And we got a quick glimpse of this episode. Now, last episode, the whole thing was based around them learning to fend for themselves and grow for themselves. But I feel like if you're not going to make it that all of a sudden they're all against Papa, because screw it, he left us there and we had to fight for ourselves. Again, you could have completely erased last episode and it probably would have meant nothing. Now, it looks like that Hiro, Zero Two, Goro, and Ichigo are less trusting of the, what are they called, the Nines, because of now they know a bit more about the world and all that stuff from last episode, but again, they could have gotten there anyways, just as most of what has happened to the show would have happened with or without the book. And just as the other problem, everything they're sort of building up to the Nines being has been pointless. Like, you have this group of characters, and I like them. I like this main blonde douchebag. I don't know why. He's fun. We get a lot of these generic blonde pretty boys in mech animes these days. I don't quite know why, but I don't know why. Something about him just entertains me. Maybe it's the way he sort of tried to manipulate Ichigo through her fears and stuff. But using that as an example, it didn't really play into anything. Ichigo already didn't like Zero Two, and once she saw Hiro in the hospital and how Zero Two almost got them all killed in that fight, she still probably would have said, keep the two away from each other before she eats him or something. Like, it just feels like they have a lot going on in the show, but ultimately it always falls back to just kind of average stuff. And while we're on the subject, the sort of thing they're implying with sex is that these kids never figured out how it works on their own, which I feel like by the time you're 15, you're figuring it out. And the problem is they're all sexually attracted to each other. We know this, or at least Fatty and Shorty are, or they're attracted to their female partners. So it's kind of like, you couldn't figure something out? I know this is kind of a weird thing to imply, but when you're making it that they're all into each other physically anyways, and are into them in the right parts, being into their breasts or their butts, or we don't spend a lot of time on the girls, how they feel for the boys, but it sort of felt like in this episode, Blondie is legitimately attracted to Rude Guy because he's handsome. I really should just write everyone's names down. But the thing is that kind of, again, breaks the logic. Like, you're telling me these kids and their raging hormones couldn't figure out that pipe A goes into socket B? Like, I don't know. maybe I'm thinking about this too much, but here's the thing. This is an anime that kind of seems to want you to think about what's going on. So, I don't know. It's just sending kind of a mixed message to me. The last thing, and we've been going for a while, so I'm going to do this quick, that there is to talk about is the sex scene. And for all the sort of problems that this episode has highlighted that this series has, I fucking love that moment. It's a very standard sort of one is sad, so the other goes to quell them, and that is what brings them together. We have seen this done before, and we've maybe for some people have seen it done better, but this was great. First up, we did see the build-up. We saw how these two, with knowledge about everything else and how they were this sort of alienated them, how they started thinking differently, and how, remember, they made a choice to be with each other. They weren't assigned. They decided, I want to be with this person. That is a very strong motivator, and it sort of plays into the teen theme of the whole show. Because maybe they're not soulmates, maybe they're not meant to be together. But the thing is, in this moment, they've sort of, as they go through their teenage rebellious phase, have been attracted to each other, and they've made a decision that they can't go back from. And I like that the episode sort of treats sex with this maturity you don't see in anime, and even you don't really see in Western media a lot too, which is great. And I like the fact that it feels like there will be consequences for their actions. Maybe she will get knocked up with his kid. Maybe 02 actually will have a child. That felt like a really weird, out of place scene. But as great as that scene is, I just wonder, will all this stuff get brought up? Because it looks like next episode we're dealing with Snake Girl, or whatever you want to call her. So will this get brought up? Like, Hero has horns now. Like, and I feel like that might just be like the thing in the last episode. He just turns to everyone after they save the day and it's like, hey, I got horns now. Okay, bye. And I don't know, I don't want to feel like plot points mean nothing in this show, but it kind of feels like plot points mean nothing in this show. Again, this show, like all Trigger Productions, is moved forward more by its quirkiness, its humor, its emotion, which I love, but there are problems, and I feel like they should be addressed. And I'm glad I took the time to address them, because to me, perfection is not real. To me, everything has problems, and when you call something perfect, it's because you don't want to acknowledge them. And, well, I don't want to ever want to be perfect with something. I want to love everything, faults and all. And that's how I feel. But tell me if that's how you feel. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know in the comment section below. And as always, click to like, click subscribe, and come back next week where hopefully I'll remember everyone's names.